imagination. And so this camera, the effects of the camera, it's on, The Voice is it's a 3-hour kind of miniseries. It's in about the first 45 minutes of the first DVD. Of part one, people will start to see this machine that I'm talking about.
Very interesting.
So again, what we're doing in voice entertainment with our films is we're exploring the conscious universe. You may have heard of a film called What the Bleep Do We Know?
Right.
The co-producer, co-director of The Bleep, Betsy Chase, has joined partnership with us, and we're releasing our films together with them. So we have a film called Water, which was made in Russia. You might have heard about it in Sweden. I'm not sure if you've heard of Water. It demonstrates the power of human consciousness and with relationship to water, and it's documented by Nobel Prize-winning physicists and physicists from the Austrian Institute of Physics, and physicists and scientists from all over the world internationally have come to this consensus that water has memory. It can record information in history. It can record everything.
That kind of suggests also the idea of homeopathy, right?
Exactly. Exactly. The idea, you see, homeopathy is vibrational medicine. And so you think of the idea that if you put vibration in medicine, the vibration of a particular plant or herb or medicine into the homeopathic remedy, that it's the vibration or structure of that plant or that remedy that's really going to heal you,
right?
Not necessarily the chemistry. But also radionics healing works a very similar way. A radionics doctor will take a sample of your blood, and they will send vibrations, particular healing vibrations, into your blood, and at a distance, regardless of where you are on the planet, your blood will respond to those vibrations. And that could be very dangerous too, because it could be used in a really horrible way. Someone could take a sample of your blood, which is your personal DNA, and they could be doing voodoo to it. So it's not something that it's a great power that you don't want to really mess with.
Well, it's like with all things. I mean, you could use it for good or for bad, and it's a flip side on all of these things. I guess the important thing is to know that this is real, because then you actually have the knowledge and the in the intention that that this can be used either for good or for bad, and if we're aware of it, that's the first place to begin. Yeah,
it's the first place to begin. I mean, understanding that, like, for example, in the beginning of The Voice, the first thing I do is I ask, to me this is the ultimate question. Scientists are describing the Big Bang, the first, trillionth of a second, billionth of a second, all the way down to the first second, and they're describing what's happening in creation, all the way down to, 15 billion years later or so, which is where we are today. And they're describing the birth of the universe as if somebody's watching. And there's a famous Zen koan that says, if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody there to see it fall, did it really fall? Well, if you don't have an observer, consciousness, you don't have the event. And the idea that organic life on our planet wasn't, our planet's over 4.5 billion years old, and that, life evolved, no more than a few 100,000 years ago at this point, human life. And you think, if there was no organic life form in the universe, and according to very, staunch conservative scientists, you don't have an observer. So if nobody's watching the Big Bang, it's not happening. But now when you think of the idea that water can scientifically be verified to have memory, consciousness, and that hydrogen, which is the H in H2O, was present about 1,000 seconds after the Big Bang. It only took 1,000 seconds for the universe to start to create structures, hydrogen, that can store information or self-reflect or therefore be self-aware. The universe, it seems, as soon as you have hydrogen, is self-aware, but it's possible that consciousness existed even before that. And the idea that, when you look at Einstein's spooky action at a distance and you see instantaneous propagation of thought or information, and you think of the speed of light limit being amazingly slow in the size of our galaxy, let alone the universe, it means there's an actual verifiable force there that is probably consciousness. And I think that is what caused Einstein to say that anyone who gets involved in the field of scientific research at this particular level, he states, in his own words, that they become convinced that a spirit vastly superior to that of man is present in the universe.
Yeah.
And I think it was action at a distance that caused him to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, action at a distance violated the speed of light limit and most of what Einstein set forth in his theory of relativity. It was the one thing that baffled him to no end, but I think it was the thing that made him become sort of a spiritual thinker.
Very interesting. There's so many things there that I kind of want to pick up on. And one thing, of course, that is very interesting in regards to water that you mentioned, excuse me, is because in your film, Evidence the Case for NASA UFOs, you detail a little bit about these phenomena with water coming into the planet. And what, I began to think about here right away was that could this be in a way that signify that kind of a new consciousness is coming into the planet, or is this occurring all the time? Have you had any thoughts about this after you made the film and after you made this discovery?
Well, Water was a film made by Russian producer Sereda Medvedeva, which my company is distributing with the Believe people, and they're also distributing The Voice. They have waterthemovie.com and thevoicedvd.com is our relationship with them.
Right.
But I know what you're talking about. You're talking about in Evidence the Case for NASA UFOs, you have the University of Iowa, Louis A. Frank, who's one of the principal investigators on many of our satellite missions to the various planets. He's the one that discovered that only on the ultraviolet sensitive cameras, still cameras, on some of the satellites, he noticed these giant balls of water were coming in from outer space. And I got into these incredible dialogues with him about, well, how would water survive the intense solar radiation? Wouldn't it just burn up before it even got into the atmosphere?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you're right, but what was interesting about this particular type of water is that it was only showing up in the invisible ultraviolet. So that means you have mass, you have hydrogen and oxygen, water, but it's invisible, which means it must be vibrating in a higher frequency of actual mass at a higher frequency, and that's a subject that very, very few people even talk about in physics.
Right.
That the idea that mass can go ultra-high frequency or interdimensional. Not anything physical, a gas, liquid, or solid, you should be able to see with ordinary sunlight, but these balls of water didn't show up, and they could clearly see them impacting the upper atmosphere and producing these 100-mile-wide vapor clouds in the upper atmosphere and transferring, oxygen and hydrogen into the upper atmosphere. And there, when you think of the idea that consciousness may be in these droplets of water, there could be a transference. There could be something happening that we can't even conceive of yet. And Louis A. Frank's observations were laughed at by a lot of mainstream scientists, but he was convinced they were there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sent him videotapes from space shuttle missions that also had the ability to see into the ultraviolet, these black and white video cameras.
Right.
And you see these impactors coming in from outer space, and he wrote me back that he was convinced that these might be the same things he was seeing on the still photographic cameras on these different satellites.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end of our conversation, and he said his researchers were fascinated by the NASA photography that I sent him, and that was kind of the end of it. He really didn't want to get into the subject of UFOs too much.
Right.
But when you look at the size of some of these objects that show up on these invisible light video cameras on NASA's cameras, some of these things are 3 miles wide, as we demonstrated. And that is the idea, and you can see these waves, these spiraling geometry waveforms pulsing out of them, which when we slow the waves down, you can see are the traditional Fibonacci spiral waveform. And you think, well, what if these things are strobing the planet with consciousness, with information?
Right.
And what is that information doing? Is are these like gods, these giant fields that are 3 miles wide, and these fields are emitting consciousness? I mean, it becomes really incredible when you really think of the idea that, you know, we want an extraterrestrial to arrive in an ocean liner and step out and have arms and legs, but what if they're just fields that are invisible to most humans, but these fields are showing up on these video cameras, and they're transmitters of intelligence?
Well, I mean, as you kind of elaborate on in the film Evidence, the Case for NASA UFOs, you mentioned that idea again about going into higher frequency, and this enables you to travel faster, basically. And I guess the question there arises: okay, so how do you go into that higher frequency state, and how do you go back from it? And what we might be seeing there is something that still is in the higher frequency range. Even ET or some other intelligent being might actually live in this field, but not be able to go back into our frequency field. I have no idea. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I really think a lot about what you just said. I mean, that is my whole theory, is that, when I saw a UFO, a metallic spaceship right in front of my eyes when I was 7 years old in Berkeley, California in 1968, after 20 minutes of a crowd of people watching, and the thing just went invisible in a blink of an eye. Mm. And think if you were a fish and you were underneath, one of the great oceans or lakes, in Sweden, and you're under the water, and you're with another fish next to you, and your buddy fish gets caught by a fishing line, and he goes flying out of the water. You look up, and as far as you're concerned, the top of the water is the top of your universe.
Right.
And as soon as he leaves the top of the water, he's invisible.
Yep.
You don't know where he went, but he's actually in another dimension right above you called air mass.
Yeah.
But you can't see him. Once he goes a few feet above the surface of the water, he's invisible. And that's how I see these UFOs. They go invisible by changing their vibration, their frequency of all the molecular and atomic structures in their spaceship and in the pilot, the actual extraterrestrial's body. Mm. And so when they go into a higher frequency, they just simply disappear from our view. It doesn't mean they don't exist, they're just not here.
Right, right.
And I've come to the conclusion that these super advanced extraterrestrials are not moving like an ocean liner moves through an ocean. They're not moving through the fabric of space itself. They jump out of space, just like the fish jumped out of the water.
Right.
That's why we don't see them, coming, like here they are, they're coming by Venus, and, they're going to be here X amount of time, and we can estimate the time of their arrival because they're going at this speed. All of a sudden they just pop in our atmosphere, and then they hang out for a while and they're gone.
Yeah.
They don't, and they can zip around. Once they lower themselves to our dimension, they can, zip around the planet for a while, and then they just pop out. And the digital camera, with the advent of all these little digital cameras everyone's buying, people are taking pictures on their vacations, and, above a lake or, right above, I know this one above the waters around Fiji, this ultraviolet colored disc-shaped flying saucer just appears in the middle of the frame. And they didn't see it when they took the picture. And I have several examples of this from here to Andromeda. And you can really see this. So you're starting to get scientific proof that they're really here. They're just not visible to the naked eye. Mm-hmm. And I really became fascinated by the invisible when, after meditating for many, many, many years, I had, in 1994, and I've said this on many radio shows, so it's not so shocking, but Jesus Christ appeared to me, and I was Buddhist, hardcore Buddhist. He appeared in this blaze of light, 1,000 suns, brightness. I fell upon my face, and he began teaching me, mystic Christianity and the teachings of singularity, non-dualism, which is a very, very deep subject. I ended up finding out that everything Jesus said to me was extant in the non-canonized Gnostic Gospels, and even some of the canonized Christian Gospels, that his teachings on non-dualism were synonymous with the teachings on non-dualism in Buddhism. Nirvana is the ultimate non-dualistic state of consciousness.